Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream with me. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today on March 24th. We're going to be doing a live stream of a dry run of my conference talk at Epic Conf, which is going to be day after tomorrow. Hello to everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for joining me. Arya is Shruti live stream equals true. Returns true. What a cute Arya attribute. Jimmy, welcome. Honor, first time. Always first time. Kizzy, good to see you, Kizzy. Aditya, welcome back. Chinmay, how's it going? Anybody I missed on Twitter? Cool. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If this is your first live stream, I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I am a software engineer, and I have been building web applications for over a decade now, 11 years now. And I feel like building accessible web application wasn't something that I learned, or even if when I learned it, it wasn't something that I really grasped, like what it entailed. And it wasn't until I started working at Slack when I figured out what it really needed and how kind of involved it was. And so through this talk that I'll be doing a dry run of today, I'm going to show you what you need to build an accessible web application. This is actually an accompaniment to articles that I've written on Epic Web for screen reader testing and keyboard testing. So I will also point you to those resources so I don't have to go in detail in those content here. But today I'm going to walk you through how to build an accessible web app. Hi Devon, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Having said that, I also have a poll for you. So here's your question. And this is going to be on YouTube, so come on down to YouTube so you can vote. How have you ever done accessibility testing for your app? Yes, no, and I am unsure what that is. And none of these is a wrong answer. Even if you don't know what that entails, that's totally fine. That's what this talk is for. So let me know what you think. Meanwhile, let me check the stream health, make sure everything is looking good. Okay, some people haven't done accessibility testing. Some people aren't sure what that is. Great. I love these responses. Thank you for voting. Please keep them coming. I will be watching this chat throughout the talk. And the reason I'm doing this dry run is because I feel like accessible web apps, like the poll here says, is not something that is part of like typical or even any front-end development tutorials or content. And so when you have to build an accessible web application, you're like, well, what the hell do I have to do? Where do I start? There's a lot that goes into it. But then also, there's a lot that goes beyond that is just adding ARIA labels and adding tab index and just calling it a day. There's a lot more involved. It's a lot more involved, and it's a lot more complicated than just adding a tab index and being like, okay, it's accessible. Because sometimes we build really poor experiences, and that can actually worsen the experience for somebody who is reliant on assistive technologies for navigating the web. So, we're going to talk about all of that today. I see that somebody has done accessibility testing for your app, which is cool, awesome. I would actually love to know if you've done accessibility testing. What kind of tools have you used? Did you do manual testing? Did you write any automated test, or did you do any sort of testing with plugins like Wave or Axe? I would love to know. Let me know. Hi, Hunter. Welcome back. Danishk, how's it going? Thank you for joining us again. Also, what time is it where you guys are and girls are? Tell me in the comments what time is it, or in the chat what time is it, and where are you joining me from? Remember, you're either first or you're not, so I'm always first timer. Perfect, love it. Each day is a new day, right? It's always an opportunity to start once again, all over again. Okay, I'm also gonna get my screen shared as well. Oh, before I start diving in, I wanna also tell about this little banner that's going. It says bit.ly/free React book. This is actually a free React interview guide that I have put together. You can get it at that link, bit.ly/free React book. It is a collection of interview questions that I have received when interviewing myself. It includes tips on how to prepare for a React interview, because most times they are not lead code questions, but also they're not just JavaScript questions. So what the heck are they? And there isn't a ton of resources available, I felt, on YouTube as well, that talks about like what is a React interview question. So I put all of that together in this ebook. It is completely free. Check it out. 11 p.m. Dallas, Texas. Oh, hey, well, thank you for joining me from Dallas. Also, is anybody coming to Epic Conf tomorrow? Would I be seeing you? Didn't really care for accessibility till I started using Epic Stack. I love that. I love that he said that. Yeah, Epic Stack, Kent has put a lot of thought in making sure that the components are accessible. And that is a great place to start. Also, Biome has hints for accessibility out of the box. Has links for accessibility out of the box. Nice. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I just realized that I have a different screen, so I'm going to have to reset the screen. Done. Also, thank you to everybody who has been patient with me over the last week when I wasn't feeling well and had to take 2 to 3 days off for streaming. Thank you so much for being so sweet and for all the kind messages of well wishes. I feel a lot better now. See you, Hunter. Thank you for joining. Talk to you later. Okay, folks, so in this presentation, Um, what I want to do is talk about what is it like building an accessible web app. It would, because I'm doing this as a dry run for my conference that's going to happen on Wednesday. It would really help me if you also gave me your feedback or left your questions while I talk about the topic within the chat itself. And the reason being, I have not done this presentation in front of anybody else. This is the first time I'm demoing this presentation. So if there are any questions, I would love to one, answer those questions, but also incorporate them in the presentation as well. So thank you so much for putting them down in the chat. Before we get started, I also want to start off with asking you if you have any initial questions about accessibility. And I see, let me see, take a quick look at the poll. So 57% of folks said that you have not done accessibility testing for your app. 14% have said, 25% have said yes. Okay, I'm gonna wait till more people answer this. I think I'm gonna wait till 10 people answer this. Because now the numbers are going up. 25% people have said yes, which is awesome. My initial question, without even looking at the talk, is where do you get started when you already have a mature app? I love this question. Working with a mature app and making it accessible is so much harder than building um, building an accessible app from the get-go. One of the really interesting images for that is, imagine you're making a blueberry muffin and you ended up making the muffin and then later on realized that you need to make it blueberry muffin. So then you just like put blueberries inside, just shove them inside from the top, and you have this like gross looking blueberry muffin. Whereas if you remember that you have to build a blueberry muffin and that is part of your requirement, you bake blueberries in. So then when you make a muffin, it is beautiful and has blueberries baked in, right? That's what building an accessible web app is. Instead of shoving accessibility on the app and making it look kind of crappy and not a really great experience, if you think about how to build an accessible app from the get-go itself, it is a lot easier to make a good user experience without having to spend too much time building accessible web apps. Because oftentimes when you end up building accessible web apps, if the component is not accessible, you may sometimes have to trash that component, which sucks. But that is a great question, and I'm going to try to keep that question in mind while I answer while I go through this talk, which is, when you have already gotten started, how do you take care of your app? The talk that I'm talking about today kind of helps you understand that accessibility is important from the get-go itself. And when you build an accessible app, what are some considerations you have to keep in mind? Or when you're building an app, what are some considerations you'll keep in mind? The demo, I'll also be doing a demo, and in the demo, I actually show you an app that I built for Tanstack Start. And that app is a fully functioning app. In that app, I have a bunch of jokes. But then, now that, let's say it's time to ship that app, I'm thinking of making it accessible. And this is very common use case at work as well, which is you have an app built and then it's time to ship it. And then the legal team tells you, well, you have to make it accessible. So then how do you do it? I'm going to walk you through that in the demo itself and show you the good, better, and best practices of building an accessible component. How to get started with accessibility? Great question as well. I'm going to also keep 2 links handy so I can point people. I feel like the question probably parallels with many other best practices an app might not be doing. Okay. So a quick question of how to get started with accessibility. I have actually written 2 blog posts on Epic Web, which are about getting started with accessibility from a keyboard standpoint and a screen reader standpoint. So I left that link in here, and that will be a good resource for if you're just getting started with it. And both of these talk about like in detail about whether you want to test with keyboard or with a screen reader. So I would highly recommend that. I'm also going to pin this in YouTube. Okay. Now that we are ready, I have a question for you. I have another question for you and Paul. Okay, I'm gonna start a Q&A so you can leave your questions here. What questions? Okay, so feel free to leave your questions in here. I will be keeping a watch on these questions and the live chat throughout this stream. Um, Such as go feature by feature and start small. Yes, that is exactly right, Jimmy. Oh, wait. With many other best practices an app might not be doing, such as go feature by feature and start small. Yeah, like I think starting small is actually a really great example of how to tackle a small component and then make it accessible and then add another and make it accessible. So building component by component instead of like tackling the entire app together and thinking about like getting lost, getting overwhelmed. There's a lot to do. Instead of that, tackling feature by feature. And then while you're doing that, you can also build utilities that can help you navigate focus between the features, help you transition from one feature to another, close a modal, handle interactions, things like that. Hitesh, welcome. When we built Zell site at what does BOFA stand for? Bank of, it was about making it visible and working fine when we zoom it in at 400%, also make it accessible through keyboard tabs and voicing out each time when we switch. Awesome. I love that. Zooming something at 400% and the fact that people actually use the site zoomed in at 400% was not something that I was aware of. Oh, Bank of America. Okay. Um, it's not something that I was aware of, and I had no idea that people would be using my components like that. But then when I went into user testing and I saw people actually like zoomed into the screen that I was working on at the time, which was Slack Huddle, I was like, wait, this makes like this opens up my eyes so much. I have never seen my component being used like that, and I would have never thought of like helping people understand where they are in the app if they are 400% zoomed in. So the point being that user testing when building an app is super important, even though you may have done everything that the checklist says, the WCAG guideline says. Even then, doing user testing is super important. Okay, enough chat. Let's get into it. I have opened a question Q&A panel, so leave your questions in there. I'm going to be watching that while I start the presentation. The first question is not sure what 11Y, which is actually ally, stands for. No problem. I will answer that question in a second. And then you know what we're gonna do? I have this question in the chat. So if somebody asks what is ally, I want you all to then let them know. You're gonna be the counselors and the guides. If there are people who are gonna ask in the chat in the future or in the stream, you're gonna tell them what ally stands for. So ALLY is a short for accessibility. A being accessible, A stands for accessibility, and then the 11 is actually 11 characters between A and Y. So ally is a short form for accessibility. It's written as A11Y, but it's read as ally. It's a cute little fact. And if that makes sense to you, you're gonna be our guide. Alrighty, let's get started. So, building accessible web apps. Why we're talking about this is because oftentimes when we build web applications, we are given a spec and we are told to make it accessible. Sometimes we start off by having like a completely clean slate, and it's easy to build the expectations and make it accessible. Like on the left side, if we're starting from a brand new house, it's much easier to make a ramp that is accessible, right? That has the right gradient, that has the right length. But sometimes we end up in situations where we are putting accessibility as a last thought, and we haven't really had time to figure out which components are accessible, which components need more user research, and oftentimes we end up just like slapping accessibility as the last thought. And it leads to something like on the right, where the ramp itself is inaccessible, and there's a staircase, this weird staircase between the ramp. So, hopefully, this gives you a demonstration of how it is important to think about accessibility from the get go so that we're not slapping in accessibility as a last thought and end up with poor and worse user experiences. I am doing this talk because I feel like I felt very confident in my accessibility skills. I had read all the work hack guidelines and I was like, I know what to do. I know ARIA labels and I know the roles and I know tab index. So I got those three tools in my arsenal and I am a front end expert and I can build accessible web apps. Until I actually became an accessibility engineer. And oh my God, how wrong was I? The thought that needs to go into building an accessible web app is a lot more greater than just putting tab index on anything and adding a role and adding ARIA attributes and just calling it a day. It's a lot more about what the experience feels like for a user, just like how we do user testing for people with sighted or like able bodies. We also have to do user testing for people with disabilities. So, quick introduction of myself. If you do not know, or if you're joining me for the first time, I'm Shruti Kapoor, your favorite developer, entertainer, and content creator. And in this talk, I'm going to show you what it means to build an accessible web application, some of the tools you need, and what code looks good or decent enough to be accessible, how can we make it better, and how can we give users a really great experience to really help improve the way they browse the web. Also, if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to me. We are almost at 3,500 subscribers. I am so excited. If you joined me before, you would know that on February 28th, we celebrated reaching 3,000 subscribers. And our next milestone is going to be 5,000 subscribers, and I'm sure we're going to get there soon. So thank you so much for following me. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get into it. So, first thing, who cares about accessibility? Why are we talking about this? Here's an outline of what we're going to talk about. And then we're also going to talk about when should I make it accessible. So, oftentimes we say that, like putting access, baking accessibility at the end or like slapping an accessibility at the end is not the right move. But then what is the right move? When you're giving the design or when you're thinking about what to make or when you have just completed a component or when you're QA testing, like what is a good time frame to make it accessible? So I'll talk about that. But then also when you've decided it's time to make it accessible, what do you need to do? And actually, I'm going to make notes as well. So let me open my notepad here. I'll also be browsing the Q&A chat while I go through this. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave that as a question in the Q&A. And I have that open here, so I will be reading your questions while I'm talking. But give me 1 second because I want to make notes as I talk through this. All right, are there any questions so far? Okay, no questions so far. Perfect. All right, let's get into it. Who cares? Like, why are we talking about this? And why I put this question is oftentimes I hear from people who are building smaller startups, building smaller components, or just working on an app by themselves. They'll say that, my audience is not that big. I know that our an audience does not have the needs of an accessibility. Can I get a reference? um what kind of reference do you mean? Oh, at Bank of America. That was distracting. Okay, I'm going to keep it on the questions tab. So if you have any questions, leave that there. All right, so like why are we talking about this? Oftentimes people say like we don't really have the needs and our audience isn't that big and we know that our audience doesn't have that need, right? It's something that we assume. But oftentimes, people's disabilities are not evident every day. Like, not everybody has the same sort of disability. In this picture, there are people facing different sorts of disabilities. Some of them could be temporary, some of them could be permanent, and some of them could be brought on in the beginning phases of their life or something that they were always born with. Whereas there could be other disabilities that kind of happen in the later part of life. On the first image here, this woman is actually pregnant. Um, and how that impacts her is different from how somebody who's on a wheelchair impacts. So she has like one computer open and maybe has a baby in her other hand, or maybe she's doing something and cannot have both of hands available. That is different from somebody who's experiencing your website through a screen reader, like the fourth user here, or somebody who probably has a robotic arm, so does not have fine motor controls. It could also be temporary disability, such as when we have an accident or we have a sprain, or we went skiing and fell down like I did and now have to walk with crutches. So disabilities can occur in different forms and shapes, and it's not always evident that people have disabilities. Something that we didn't even show in this picture is cognitive disability. There's also accessibility need different types of accessibility. So this also shows that people who have permanent disability may have accessibility needs of touch, for example, or may have an arm injury and they may have accessibility needs of touch, which is then when they need better support or better click target when using a mobile. Situational again could be somebody holding a baby and not being able to access a website with both their hands or the phone with both their hands when holding a baby. So accessibility needs can be touch, sight, where they are not able to see because they were maybe born blind or maybe they have partial blindness. It could also be temporary when somebody experienced a surgery recently, or could be a distracted driver. So there are different forms of accessibility needs. One of the ones that we actually don't talk about a lot is cognition or cognitive disabilities, which is typically neurodivergent or folks with neurodivergent um, or folks with neurodivergence. For example, people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, learning disabilities, or you could be facing a temporary disability where you're not really feeling well or you are dizzy, and your needs may be different than somebody who has needs of like hearing aids. Um, or maybe you're just distracted and on phone, so the way you browse the web is different based on what needs you have at the moment. And just to understand like who does this impact and how many people does it impact, the numbers are crazy. 1 in 4 people in the US have some form of disability. And I just talked about disability could be in various shapes and forms, right? Typically, we think of people with visual disabilities or auditory disabilities, but that's not all the types of disabilities. 4.9% of people in the US have vision disability, which is they are not able to see either completely or partially. 5.7% have difficulty hearing, which is auditory difficulty in the sense not able to hear completely or partially. And 10.8% have cognition disability. This is also the disability that involves ADHD, which, as you know, people in tech often have as well. So the numbers are crazy. It's not just something that you can completely ignore or say that, like we don't have accessible users. You don't know that you don't know that you don't have people with those needs. By ignoring people, or like by not including people who have the accessibility needs, you're actually ignoring people or ignoring the most part of your audience. 1 in 4 is a crazy number. That is 25% of the population. This is a really cool bar graph that I found. The image is a little pixelated, but I think it still gets the information around, which is this is the graph. The bar graph actually shows here the population of the countries. So if you look at USA specifically, this is the number of people who use the internet. And this is the number of people in the US who are deaf and hard of hearing, which is they have auditory disability. And these are the number of people who have blind and low vision disability. So the number of folks, if you add up here, that is more than something that we can simply neglect. It is 1/4 of the population. It's not something we can just say, like, well, I don't have people with disability needs. And I think building with accessibility in mind not just helps people with disabilities, but also everybody. Like if you've ever taken your suitcase up a flight of stairs in a really old airport or in a station, railway station where there is no elevator or no ramp, you will understand. You have to carry that thing and pick it up every stair, or in a hotel where you have like this heavy luggage and you have to pick it up. So a ramp there, like a ramp that we saw in the beginning of the stream, would have been so helpful, or an elevator even. You also probably know this when you have like bunch of things in your hand and you have to like push the door with your legs. You're also experiencing a form of temporary disability. So as you can see here, the door handle that he's using needs something that has finer motor controls, right? You need to be able to bend it and open it. Whereas if it was a button that you might have seen in some doors where you just push the button and that opens the door, or you have like an automated door button, that would have made his life so much easier. Also, at night when we are like scrolling on Instagram or watching YouTube, you might have noticed that that bright light actually bothers people around you as well. And so having a dark mode is really helpful. So, accessibility is for everyone. It not only benefits people who have disabilities, but also benefits people who are experiencing some form of temporary disability, which the question is not if we will accept, if we will experience disability. The question is when. All right, I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions in the chat. What are the implications of not making your web apps accessible? This is a really great question. This is a really great question. What are the implications of not making a web app accessible? Beyond having a bad user experience for people who have disabilities, it is also actually a legal issue. In the US, Canada, and UK, there are laws that prevent websites from, there are laws that require websites to be accessible and display a statement of accessibility. So, by not making your web app accessible, you're actually pushing people away from your experience and losing a lot of money while doing that. But also, you can get a legal lawsuit. So, great question, Devon. Hey, Eddie, welcome to the stream. Good to see you here. My mom is in the chat. Hi, Mom. I'm going to see if anybody else has any questions. And I've got questions open here. Also, during this presentation, if any part of it doesn't make sense, let me know as well. I'm also gonna update the title of the conference of this stream. Alrighty, so let's get back into it. I see that there are no more questions, which is great. Okay, so let's make web app accessible. What does it mean? Who does it? What does it mean? What does it entail? First of all, what does it even mean to be an accessible web app? I think a simple rule of thumb is that making a web app accessible or making anything accessible means that a person with disability can have the same information, engage in the same user interactions, and enjoy the same services that a person without a disability can enjoy. And here's something important as well to call out: in an equally effective, equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. And I think this is really important to call out because you can simply add tab index to something like your components and call it a day. And technically, you would be accessible from the WCAG guidelines. But just by merely, I guess, not even accessible if you're not managing focus correctly, but you would be a long way there. But that does not mean that the user who's experiencing disability can integrate with the app and can interact with the app in an easy to use manner. So, with substantial equivalent ease of use is an important term there, and I love this definition of accessibility. So, what is accessible web apps? What is accessibility? It's simply that a person with disability can have the same experience and the same ease of use as a person without a disability. And if you just keep that in mind, I think that itself helps a lot in building accessible web applications. And what that means is, imagine that you're building a form, imagine that you're building a component, any custom component. If a person who's using screen reader has to go through 20 different items just to get to hit that one button, that is not an accessible experience. So think about the experience that the user experience that a person with disability is going through as well. I like so when we think about like how do people use the web, how do people with disabilities use the web, it's really important to understand like not everybody is using keyboard or not everybody is using screen readers. People use web in different forms, in different ways. So screen readers is a very common one that people use to read out the text. Screen magnifiers, which is something that we were talking about just in the chat, is to zooms into screen. And screen magnifier can actually help you zoom up to 400% times of your screen, which means that if you have something that is like really small or really close to each other, when somebody has zoomed in, they're able to see that much clearly, but then also they lose context of something that else that was on the other side of the app. So think about like what is the experience that somebody who may have zoomed in that much is experiencing, and if they're able to navigate from one side of the app to the other side of the app real estate wise, and how can they switch between that, and are we preventing the user in moving around in the app or are we enabling them? Selection switches is for motor disabilities, helps people to click, helps people to select items. Head tracker for mouse. This is actually really cool and it is available in Mac as well. You can try it out in your accessibility tools. Basically, it tracks what your mouse position is, and without having to even touch anything or use a keyboard or use a screen reader, you can actually browse the web by just pointing in the direction of where you want to click. And that's really helpful for people who are experiencing motor disabilities and not able to use a mouse or a trackpad. There's also other parts of there's also other ways that people interact using closed captions for audio, voice recognition, and things like that. So, when building a web application, there are 8 major steps to help you build a web application that is accessible when developing it. And here they are. Number first is understand and implement WCAG guidelines. What is WCAG? Let me actually open that for you since I'm right here. Okay, here's what WCAG stands for. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it actually lays down a bunch of checklists and items and requirements that a website should have in order to be accessible. There are multiple guidelines. There's WCAG A, AA, and AAA. Let me open that for you. WCAG AA. Okay, web content accessibility guidelines, level AA conformance. And the goal is that level A is the minimum level of conformance that a website needs to have in order to be called accessible. Level AA includes all level A and AA requirements, which means it is a better user experience for a web app to be AA compliant. And this is where all companies target. So if you're working at a company that needs accessibility, you must aim to get to level AA. Then level AAA is actually even further than that, which helps in making the website even better for folks with disabilities. If you're building a web app, I would strive to get at least to AA. And what they are is actually written in here. Web conformance section, 3 levels, AA, and AAA. Where is it? The site is not very easy to navigate though. It sucks because it's for accessibility. There. There it is. And so on the left side, actually, this is a huge document, but on the left side, it outlines things that your website needs to have in order to be level AA compliant. So I am going to leave that in here. So if you're building a web app and making it accessible, I would highly encourage going through this list. There's actually a better list as well that talks about making web app accessible, and it is better than this one. Let me find out. I'm going to find that out later and leave it in the comment section afterwards. So, number one, understand and implement WCAG guidelines, and this is actually most of what your tools target and linting rules target. So, if you already have a linter or if you already have a web extension that is checking for accessibility, this is what they're checking, and that's already a great start. Towards the end, I'll also talk about what tools are available, but WCAG guidelines, number one. Perform regular accessibility audits. Oftentimes, people feel that once you build accessible components and accessible app, your work is done. But just like how when you add a new feature, and you have to keep adding features to your web app, it's the same way when you have to keep adding web features, you have to keep making sure that they are accessible as well. So every line of code that you write and every feature you ship, you have to make sure that there is an accessible web app. Ensure keyboard navigation and screen reader compatibility. This is something that we're going to talk about in this talk, which is ensuring keyboard navigation and screen reader compatibility, and how does that affect us in building a web application, and what does that even mean. I pointed out to 2 articles that I have actually linked in the, I have pinned that in the chat, so check that out. It is on Epic Web. Those are the articles that in which I talk about what it means to be keyword accessible and screen reader compatible, and what options do you have available. Check that out. That's a very detailed article. In the talk today, I'm going to talk about wow what it means to be keyboard accessible. And then provide all text for images and media. I think this is fairly straightforward, but this is often times missed, especially for images that could be decorative media. When people are experiencing a website through a screen reader, every image gets announced that has an alt tag. So if you have an image that is important for the user to understand and it doesn't have an alt text, the user will completely miss that image. So it's important that any media, which is like videos, should have closed captions. Any images should have a described alt text as well. There's one tip that I would like to give in this, which is that alt text doesn't just mean that you write an image of this, or like an image of um, a lady drinking water, for example, if a girl was drinking water. The alt text needs to convey what the user is trying to see, what the user is doing, or what the image is describing, and what is the emotion behind that image. For example, a lady drinking water when there is flood around her or when she's in a flooded environment is a lot different than a lady drinking water at a school or um, like from the water cooler. It's a lot different. Those two emotions convey, like those two pictures or just the description of those two pictures convey very different emotions. So when you're thinking of alt text, don't just think about describing the facts of the image, but also try to convey the message of that image as well. So in the first image that I described, which is the lady drinking water when there is flood around her, there's devastation, it could be a sign of hope. And so you could say something like a lady feeling hopeful while drinking water. So you're trying to convey what the image is saying, what the image is trying to convey to the user as an emotion, because images do convey emotions, right? That's what we're trying to pass on as an alt text. Whereas in other, it could be a simple like scene from the school, and we're trying to show that the kid is on a break. So you could incorporate that in the alt text. Maintain high color contrast and readable fonts. This is again something that your accessibility tools can really helpful, but this is also a helpful tip when doing design phase, which is make sure that your foreground and background have enough contrast and your size is readable enough and the font style is readable enough. Also, there are fonts that are specifically targeted for dyslexic groups of users. So if you are building a website and that has a lot of text, consider opting dyslexic friendly fonts. An example of dyslexic friendly font is Comic Sans. So build your site with Comic Sans. Number 6, design accessible forms and consistent navigation. When we look at the demo today, in the code demo today, this will make a lot more sense. But if you can imagine that you have a form that opens up in a modal or something, the user who's using a screen reader or a keyboard has to go through this and understand that is like what is going on, what is the label, if there's any errors, what the error is, what is the field that the error is going on. So the user who's using a screen reader has to be able to perceive all of that information. And so the requirement of the form is to be able to give all of that information to the user and allow the user to navigate between items and not get stuck within a form. What consistent navigation here means is that let's say that you have opened a form and you want to like close the form. Typically you would hit escape. Now let's say that you've closed the form, you go back to your main app. Think about where the focus will land when the user goes back to your main app. What does it mean for the focus to land? Basically, what focus landing means is that let's say you're hitting tap 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 on your website. Let me see if I can do a demo. So let's say that, so I'm now using the tab key on my app, on my keyboard, and I go tap, 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 tap. And let's say that I open a item, for example, this one. So it takes my app to a new page, but where is my focus at this point? You see that I have an outline at accessible web in the top, and that's where my focus has landed. So it's important to make sure that when a user goes from one screen to another or closes a modal or start opens a new modal, the focus or where they're looking at or where they're in the app should be saved, should be consistent, and should not jump from one place to another. That's what it means to have consistent navigation. Offer text resizing and adjustability, just like we were talking about earlier, that people do zoom into the screen. It is important that your text is zoomable so that people can easily zoom it if they need to in order to view it better. And finally, create an accessibility statement and seek user feedback. I talked about this earlier as well, where you could do all the things right according to the checklist, but if the user still has difficulty perceiving your content and operating your website, your site is still not accessible to them. So it is important that you seek user feedback, and creating an accessibility statement is not only the law, but it also helps user understand that you are open to feedback and helps to capture user feedback more accurately and more promptly. Okay, when to test? Now, that is the answer. Go and test your applications now. But I have actually broken this phase down into 3 steps, just like our SDL, software development lifecycle. Number one, and the best place to start is when you start designing your app. And I've written down why designing during design phase is important. And I just realized that that is a lot of text, which is not good for people with neurodivergence. So I'm going to make a note to remove some of this text. Actually, at this point, I'll stop and see if there's any questions. Let me take a quick pause. Are there any questions about the text that we've just talked about so far? That's a good font. Yay. All right, so here's a pop quiz for you. What does A11Y stand for? Let me put that in the chat as well. What does A11Y stand for? Well, I'm gonna put my computer, my desk in a sitting position. Okay, what does A11Y stand for? Who knows the answer to that? I hope most of you do. But what does A11Y stand for? Also, hey Arjun, welcome. I was watching in Twitch. Nice. Accessibility, that is correct. You got the prize, Devon. If we were at the conference, I would be throwing out swag at this point. But you're right. A11Y stands for accessibility. And what it means is A is for the letter A, 11 is the 11 letters between A and Y. So A11Y is a short form of accessibility. Cute, right? Okay, I've left the screen up for a while now, and the reason is because I wanted you to read this. But here's some considerations during design phase. Color contrast and visual hierarchy, we talked about this just a little bit earlier, but according to WCAG AA guideline, it is important that the color contrast between the text on the forefront, for example, this text or versus the background, which is this white screen, is at least 4.5 is to 1 for normal text and 3 is to 1 for large text. And it's important also that if you're conveying meaning of something, it's important to not just rely on color for the meaning. For example, you might have seen that if you have like a stock app, sometimes it'll show a green text. That means that it is greater than what you bought, or maybe it's greater than the start price of that day. But if you only use green color to show that, people, green or red color to show high and low, people with disabilities or people with color blindness will not be able to understand the difference or the delta. So it's important that in addition to using colors for a better user experience, it is important that you also use another sort of visual aid that helps people understand whether or not what is the meaning you're trying to convey. And in this case, it could be like an up arrow or down arrow, or like increased or decreased, just the words itself, or anything like that. So don't rely just on color to convey the meaning. Keyboard and focusable elements designed with keyboard navigation in mind and define a logical tab order and ensure interactive elements such as buttons, links, inputs are reachable and focusable. What does that mean? I was just demoing that on the site that we had built, but what it means is that as you're navigating from one stop to another stop to another stop, it's important that you're able to navigate between these without losing focus and being able to navigate around the app without getting lost. Also, when you open a modal, it's important that your focus doesn't get trapped in that modal, and if you want to close it, you're still able to close it without getting lost. You should check out Srinivasu Chakra Bartula. He is Director of Product Accessibility at Freshworks. Oh, cool. Let me check that out. Oh, awesome. Both worked at PayPal. That's awesome. Okay, I will check that out. Thank you for sharing that. That's not the. Okay. Responsive and scalable text. So use relative in units like percentage, EM, RM instead of pixels, because when you zoom in with REM and EM, you're able to scale your font size as you zoom in, as opposed to pixels, which stays the same and it doesn't help when you have to resize the text. Clear and concise content. Use plain language, clear headings, and structured content to improve readability and screen reader experience. This is one of my favorite ones because we don't usually think of that. We don't usually think of having clear and concise content. And this kind of text is really helpful, and this kind of consideration is really helpful for people with neurodivergence. So instead of when you're writing text or when you're writing verbiage on a page, instead of like writing long sentences, you can make it shorter, keep it concise, and try to give the information to the user without adding extra fluff. And that can really be helpful for people with dyslexia and people with neurodivergence, ADHD, learning disabilities. So, clear and concise content, one of my favorite ones, helps in readability a lot. Accessible components and patterns. So, design UI components with accessibility in mind, such as visible focus indicators, properly labeled form elements, and ARIA roles when needed. And why this is in the design phase is when we are building web applications, we also need to think about when a user opens this, what is the experience like? If a user is using this with keyboard and screen reader, what is the experience they are going to see? How can they navigate between one component to another? And how does this component fit into the rest of the app? So that is considerations during design phase. Now, let's talk about the development phase. Hey, Jha, welcome. How is it going? We're talking about accessibility and how to build web apps that are accessible. Also, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Okay, considerations during development phase. And I'm going to pause here and wait for questions, see if there are any questions. Give you some time to read this part of the slide as well. Okay, let's do this. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will be taking a look at the questions as I'm going through each section, but also put them in the Q&A chat. But also, if anything of this web app is not clear, put that in the chat as well, because I want to answer your questions. I want to address your questions. And if you have any feedback for me while I go through this, I would appreciate that as well. Like I said, this is a dry run for my talk on Wednesday on accessibility and how to make a web app accessible. So if you have any feedback for me, please leave that in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about the considerations during development phase. First thing, semantic HTML first. And why I wrote that down here is because if you have, for example, an element like a button, instead of div for clickable elements, use a button. And why we want to do that is because when we build with semantic HTML elements, we are already leveraging the accessibility work that has been done for these elements. For example, with button, you get a role of button for free. You get a tab index, which is basically you get the interaction, which is the fact that the user can tab into that button for free. So you don't have to do anything additional for that. Similarly, for label, for form fields, and the reason is that it helps us do less work, but as developers, the reason is it helps us as developers to do less work, but also as people who are using these web applications, screen readers and keyboards have additional context by understanding the elements that are written on the page. So for example, a screen reader user may be going through the site and like reading the entire page all together and trying to quickly navigate through the site by understanding the different headings of the page, right? So if you use something like an H1 as opposed to span or div, the user is able to understand that using their screen readers and navigate through the site super fast instead of having to browse through the site one paragraph at a time. Also, the fact is that a lot of screen readers and assistive technologies, they rely on the use of semantic HTML and ARIA attributes in order to be able to give extra controls to the user. So just like I explained with heading, a user is able to quickly scan through the page by using their screen readers and rotor accessibility and rotors. But if you have if you are using div instead of using button, you tend to miss those. Also, by using a semantic HTML, you don't have to keep adding the attributes, the area attributes or the label attributes yourself, because those are already taken care of by the semantic HTML elements. And then ARIA only when necessary, which means that if you're using semantic HTML elements, you don't need to write ARIA attributes in most cases. However, if you're building your own element, it is important that you follow ARIA roles and attributes and use them for the right purpose. They are described in detail on MDN's website, so that is my go-to resource for checking out ARIA attributes. But it's important that when an element is needs an ARIA attribute, they are used with caution and not overpopulated, because they can actually worsen the experience of the user who is using assistive technologies. So use them only when necessary. Keyboard and focus handling. Implement logical focus order. Ensure all interactive elements are keyboard accessible, and use tab index thoughtfully to prevent focus traps. And why I wrote tab index thoughtfully is that even though tab index allows you to use values of greater than one and higher, they actually, by using a tab index of so if you're not familiar with what tab index is, tab index is how a user is able to, like a developer is able to add a tab stop, which is that when you use your tab key, a user is able to interact with that element. Using tab index, we're able to let the browser treat that element as an interactive element. However, if you use tab index that is greater than 0, 1 and higher, that actually disrupts the way that a user's focus moves within when using a keyboard, and that can actually deteriorate the experience for the user. So therefore, try to use tab index thoughtfully and prevent using values of greater than 1 when using tab index. So tab index can actually accept values of -1, 0, 1, and so on. And I actually talk about this in detail in the articles that I've linked up in the chat. They are pinned in the chat. But by using -1, we're actually letting the web app know that this is an interactive element. It can be tabbed into, but right now it is deactivated. And we can use -1 using JavaScript. So we can set tab index using JavaScript. Tab index 0 means that this is a currently active interactive element, and you can tab into it. So that is keyboard and focus handling. And finally, make accessibility testing part of your linting process, part of your software development lifecycle, in the sense that you need to have automated testing, you need to have manual testing when doing accessibility testing, but also when you are using linters, you also have NPM modules that can check for WCAG guidelines and proper use of ARIA roles as well. And here is one that I recommend, which is ESLint plugin JSX Ally. I'm going to put the name down in the chat as well. And this can be really helpful when you have, so this is for actually for React, and this can be really helpful because it can point out mistakes in your code itself that you may not be familiar with. So make accessibility part of your linting. And finally, just because you have accessible components does not mean that your app is accessible. Oh my god, this tripped me up so much. So I thought that the fact that I built an accessible app or accessible component means that I can guarantee that the rest of the app is going to be accessible. So I was making units accessible, and I hope that the entire app would become accessible because of that. But separately accessible components is not equal to a completely accessible app as a user experience. We've been talking about user experience a lot. So one thing that I want you to remember is that even though some blocks may be accessible, doesn't mean that the way that the user navigates through those blocks is perceivable, is operable. It's clear that the where the focus is. It's clear to the user which element they have landed on. So even though you have built accessible components and you've done all the work hack guidelines and you've put all the ARIA roles, it is important that you do manual testing of your app to ensure that your app is accessible. And we'll talk about like what manual testing means. We'll be talking about like test it from a user's perspective. When we do the demo, it'll make sense. All right, I'm gonna see if there's any questions so far in the questions tab. And then also, if you have questions, feel free to leave them. I'm gonna pause here for a minute to answer any questions. Shruti, did you come across any tools for testing accessibility, tools powered by AI? You know, AI powered tools, I am a bit hesitant to check out. Um, I have tried using Claude and ChatGPT to generate accessible code. Doesn't do really well. So I'm a bit hesitant to check out AI dependent tools. There hasn't been any in my experience so far that I have liked from an AI perspective. But there are tools that I really like. I feel like I didn't talk through that slide. I think it's coming up. The slide on tools is coming up. Accessibility tools do catch 30 to 40% of issues. So any idea how to broaden the testing horizon? Of course, we do have manual testing. User testing. That's what I would say. Accessibility tools do catch issues, but the issues that a user can catch for you, they are far better in quality than what the accessibility tools can tell you. So if you are doing manual testing as well and you've got the linters and you have the tools, the next step is to do user testing. So hopefully that makes sense, Hannon. Also, welcome to the stream. I see that this is the first time you're joining us. Okay, if you're here with me and you can still hear me and you're awake, please say yes in the chat so I know that somebody's still listening. Somebody's still here. I did once pair up with a friend who is a dev and colorblind. I tell you, I learned so much from that session, right? Like, it is so enlightening. The first time I sat in a user testing group, this is when I actually built a component and I sent it over to user testing. And I was so proud of it because, like, according to the tool, I had actually done a pretty good job. I was WCAG compatible and I took care of my ARIA labels and everything. But then when I sent it for testing, the labels he made so much fun of. He said, "Your labels don't make any sense." And it was true. Like, my labels were descriptive for somebody who has. So my label, for example, would be for a form. It would be like, I think it was. I think I was building like a grid within Slack, and the label itself would be something like card for user. And so the person who was testing my app said, well, it makes no sense to me. Like, what do you mean by card for user? I don't care that it looks like a card to you. To me, it doesn't make any sense. To me, it's not useful. So what I want to see is a Shruti Kapoor profile, and these are the items that I can do within this, right? So this is what I can These are the operations that are available to me. So I don't care what it looks like to you. I don't care that it looks like a card. I want to know what I can do with screen reader. And that was so empowering and helpful to hear, because it really helped the quality of my labels, and how I was thinking of uh, how I was thinking of how my site would be used, whereas how it was actually used. Yes, this is good. A lot of things I didn't know about accessibility. Yay! Okay, two people are up. Yes, I love that. At least I didn't put you all to sleep. I know this can be really dense, and the demo is coming up real quick. But I want to give this basics before we dive into the demo itself. So we're almost there. We're almost towards the demo. So stay with me. Also understand how tiring it can be to sit through such a long presentation. Being a neurodivergent person, but we got this. We can do this. All right, I'm going to see if there's any other questions. Okay, no questions so far. Let's keep going. QA, not Q&A, but QA testing. So I was talking about tools. Here are some tools that I recommend. Wave, great tools, helpful in identifying WCAG errors. Then there is also Axe Accessibility Checker, available as a browser extension, can be used in Chrome and Firefox. Super helpful as well. I've been using Axe for a long time. JAWS and NVDA, which are two screen readers, can be super helpful in understanding what the user perceives when they're using the screen reader. So one thing that I would highly recommend is that once you have built your app once you've built your app, use the screen reader that's available on your computer. Every computer comes with one. Mac has voiceover, which is pretty good. NVDA, JAWS is actually a paid version, but it's actually pretty good. But NVDA, which is a free version, can be used for testing what the experience looks like to somebody who's using a screen reader. And this would be such a eye-opening moment for you to see what your site looks like to somebody who cannot see or can partially see. And then finally, Lighthouse, also an open source automated tool for improving web page quality. There's a lot of things that Lighthouse has. It is a great tool for SEO as well, but also I think it's really helpful for providing an accessibility score. Believe it or not, one of my favorites tools is actually the Firefox debugging tool within the browser itself, and it gives you an audit of what your app does and what it looks like and what are some issues with accessibility. So that is something that I use a lot as well. And it actually is built into the browser. You don't need anything else. All right, here we are. Demo. Let's do it. We're finally here. Before we get to the demo, I'm gonna take a quick break and see if people have any questions. Answer any questions before we get into the code part of it. Meanwhile, I'll get my screen ready as well. So if you have any questions, leave them here. Also, how is the text so far? Does it make sense? Is it too dense? What would you say? Are you able to understand what I'm talking about? Does it make sense to you? I feel like some slides have a lot of text. Maybe it is your notes. Yeah, I think two or three slides have a lot of text. I'm still working on the slides, as you know, last minute edits. It never really ends, does it? Um, but yeah, I did notice that a lot of, so like, there were a few slides there that had a lot of text. I'm going to break them down for their presentation. Thank you for pointing that out. Curious, coming from a junior, how do you not feel overwhelmed learning accessibility? I absolutely did. I absolutely do. I mean, like I said, like in the beginning of this presentation, I thought I was a front end expert, and then I came to accessibility team, and I was immediately humbled. Like there is so much to learn, and there is so much to do, and there is so much to improve. Where do you find the balance? It is, what would you call is good enough? I feel like I've been an accessibility engineer for almost 2 years now, and I still feel like every day I'm learning something new, and every day I feel like I haven't learned enough about accessibility. The world of accessibility is so nuanced and so unexplored that most of the problems that you're working on, they may not be a solution that other people have found as well. So most times you're working on a completely novel problem which has no solution outside. So AI can't help you because this is the first time somebody's seeing this, and you can't find answers online because you're the first person to develop a component like this. So it's a lot of learning, but one thing that really helps me is thinking about the fact that the experience that I've built is better. Like I'm making the experience better for somebody instead of worsening it. And there is what was that saying? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? I think that's the saying. It's very dark, but that's what it is. Like you can build one accessible component at a time and ensure that that component has a good usability and a good experience for somebody who has a disability, whether it is cognitive disability, whether it is visual, or whether it is hearing disability, um, or whether it is a motor disability. um, so making your component better little by little and keeping accessibility in mind, I think goes a long way. Just the fact that you do keyboard and screen reader testing for your component helps so much. So I hope that was helpful. It has a nice flow to where it took some notes. Awesome. Yay. I'm glad to hear that it has a nice flow. I was hoping for it to be kind of like a story, just flows well into one slide to another. Okay, let's kick the app. Let's kick the code. Let's get it going. I'm gonna npm start my stuff. Role of typography while designing and accessibility needs to be a part of the design system. Yes, as a dev, we tend to use them a lot. That is so true. Like, I am actually on the accessibility and design system team of Slack. And so if you build, I think I talked about this, like building a blueberry muffin, right? So having design system that takes care, or like having components that are built with accessibility in mind, and having a design system that is accessible is like already starting with a good place and a good batter that has like blueberries mixed in. And so eh, all the other person has to do, or the dev has to do, is take that batter and make it into a component, or like make it into a muffin. You don't have to worry about adding blueberries in, right? It's the same thing with building accessibility design system, or like accessible design systems with design with components that are already accessible. So somebody just has to take that component, put that in their app, and ensure that it works with the rest of the app, and it also keeps the rest of the app accessible. You can just be sure that that component is accessible, and then with the help of that, you build the rest of the app around it and ensure that it didn't worsen the experience, it actually improved the experience. I think that is a good point that you mentioned, that accessibility needs to be a part of design system, and I think I'm going to add that as a statement. Okay, is my code running? npm run dev. Cool. Git branch. How design is involved? You answered my next question. Nice. Okay. Localhost. Alrighty. Get this up in here. Open this. Switch. I'm actually going to move these here as well. Last question from me: how to tackle third party apps libraries we integrate with might not be accessible friendly. Oh my god, that is such a hard problem to solve, which is building with third party libraries that are not accessible themselves, or may not be well thought of from an accessibility perspective. I would say first, if that is the third party library that you're choosing and you have a choice to make, don't go for a library like that. Choose an alternative. Number one. so so don't go for that library. Number one. But number two, if you don't have an ability to change the library that you've built, see if you can reach out to the developers of the library and ask certain things to be included. Obviously, you can't ask them like make this accessible. You can ask for certain things to be included. A small example being some component libraries um, may not allow you to pass in extra props, and if they are not already taking care of aria attributes or aria labels, it becomes impossible to add aria labels. So then what you could do is you can ask them to add aria label or improve the library a little bit, or you can point out exactly the things that you need help with. So that's number two. And number three, if none of that works, then unfortunately we have to do hacky ways in which we create like this div on top of. There are actually multiple ways of doing that, but there's two things that I'll talk about. You could create a div on top of the component itself in which you can extract like labels or aria described by, and you can try to show the user what, or um, demonstrate to the user what it means, like what is that component trying to do. So taking out the logic of it into a parent component, like a parent div, and adding aria attributes there helps a lot. If your app or your component is completely opaque to the screen reader and keyboard, it becomes extremely hard to then build a web app that is accessible. But a hack that works is that you can actually build a kind of like a mirror of that component and then add accessibility to that component. And when a screen reader is activated, that is kind of like a screen reader component where the user can hear what is the context of it. And I think this is what Google Docs has done. It has an absolute position div that has all of the labels within it. This is how Google Docs is able to announce, because Google Docs is actually a Canvas element, and Canvas element is not accessible. It's notorious for that. But in order to make that accessible, you can have kind of like an absolutely positioned div, and you can have ARIA attributes. You have to programmatically do it for every update. It becomes really hard. We had to get an accessibility widget added to the app as we faced with legal issues. Yeah, it is that is where kind of the big pressure comes in. And a lot of people ask me, like, how do you convince your team to be accessible when they say they don't have time or they're in a hustle culture? And I will tell them that you can either be accessible now or pay a hefty fine and be accessible. So which do you want to do? Okay, so let's get into this. All right, this is a Tan Stack Start app that I have built where I am displaying a list of dev jokes. So let's actually go through a dev joke. Why not? I like this one. What are pointers in C? I know a guy who knows a guy who knows another guy. What do the new MacBook and a black hole have in common? There's no escape, except now the MacBook does. Oh, there's one that I really like. Um, how do you declare war in JavaScript? Var, war. There's one that I really like in here about GraphQL. Oh, oh my god, time to sleep already. Okay, let's go, cause I gotta be up early to catch my flight. So let's go. All right, so let's do an accessibility audit on this side. Here's the kind of the way I see you testing your component. This is one way of doing development focused testing and development focused accessibility focused development. At this point, your app is fully functional. So here, if I add a joke, let's say I add what does um, I don't know, tell me a dev joke. Does anybody know a dev joke? Nothing is coming to my mind right now. Okay, let's try this one. How do you console a how do you console a JavaScript bug? Oh my god, how do you comfort a JavaScript bug? See, my brain is dying already. You console it. So that is a joke. Now, if I add this joke, it actually goes to the bottom of the list. Fully functioning app. But at this point, now that I feel like my app is in a state where I call it fully functioning, this is a really good place to test whether or not this app is whether or not this app is accessible. Now, mind you, I have only added these are all Shadsian components. So I have only added a form at the top which says like enter a joke and enter a punchline and click and has a button that when you add joke adds it to the bottom of the list. Then I have a bunch of cards in here and they look pretty nice, and like if you hover on them, you'll actually see that it shows you which card is kind of hovered on. So they are visually appealing, the color contrast is good, spacing is good, looking pretty good. But what does a user using the site with screen reader see or perceive? Let's find out. I'm going to start my screen reader, which is actually in your, um, oh, I think I don't have it open here. Accessibility. You look for accessibility in your computer. It gives you, in Mac, it gives you these tools. Oh, it does not. Let me move it here. Okay. And then if you go to voiceover, that is the screen reader within Mac. So I'm going to turn this on.
VoiceOver, open VoiceOver utility, muting, desktop, split group.
And I just muted
You are
this, but
currently on a
basically it
table.
speaks
To enter
through
this table,
this
press
text that it sees
Control,
on the
Option,
screen
Shift,
as
group.
it's seeing it. So I moved this black thing here, but this is where it
Split
describes what it's
group.
seeing. So if I am in general right now, if
Verbosity,
I go
speech,
to, this will show
navigation,
you and navigate these tabs
web,
as I navigate
sound,
with
visuals,
with my keyboard.
commands.
Now, people who are using screen reader may also be able to command the screen reader
Web,
using
general.
keyboard shortcuts that the screen reader provides as well, which are different from the keyboard shortcuts from the up and down arrow navigation keys. I'm not going to go into those in detail, but
Verbosity,
the overall idea is
speech,
that this is
web,
what
sound,
user using screen reader would
visuals, command, braille,
see. Okay,
activities.
the text on here is what gets announced.
Split group. Voiceover recognition. Cell.
Okay.
Voiceover utility.
This is still speaking.
Sound. Split group. Split group. Commands. Speech. Samantha. English.
Okay, you probably should be able to hear me now. Um, it's funny. I muted the output of the narrator, so I couldn't hear them, but turns out you still could. Okay. What I was saying is that this is basically what the screen reader experience looks like. At the bottom here, you'll see what the screen reader announces, and at the top here, you'll see that as I navigate, and use my keyboard to navigate between these items, what is being announced also changes, but then also the keyboard actually changes the tab to the one that I move to. So this is an example of an accessible experience, and this is what we strive to. I'm going to close this, keep the voiceover open. Now let's go into our app and see what we see. All right, so already I'm going to make this bigger. And I'm gonna make this active. Now, when you're using a keyboard, it is important that when you're testing with screen reader, it is important that you give up the mouse and use only the screen reader, only the keyboard, so that you get the full experience of what the screen reader navigation looks like. So I'm going to use my keyboard to switch into my first form field, which is enter your joke setup. On the left, you'll see that it says you're currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type. So to start typing, it starts announcing what I'm typing. Okay. And then I can hit the back enter key, just normal keyboard controls. Now, if I want to move to the next tab, next button or input field that says enter your joke punchline, I'm going to hit tab and I'm into it. Now it says enter your joke punchline, edit text, blank. So basically it's giving the user context that you're on an empty input field and the placeholder for this is enter your joke punchline. So the user now understands that, okay, they are into the next input field. It is currently blank and I need to enter my joke punchline. So they could enter something like, I see that Devon actually gave a joke here. What did the terminal say to GitHub? Get out of here. I'm going to add that here. Get out of here. Okay. And then if I go back and here it says, what did the terminal say to GitHub? Okay, now as you can imagine, I need to tab over and then tab over and hit add joke. And I expect this to go to the bottom of the list and I should get some feedback that it has been successfully submitted. So let's see what happens if I hit add joke. Okay, the app refreshed. I'm back to main. My text here says you're currently on a main inside of web content. I don't know what just happened. I don't know if it actually submitted that joke, and I don't know if my app had an error, right? So I don't know what's going on. So that's fault number one. That is one problem. Now, if I go back to this app and if I scroll down, let's just make sure that it actually added the joke. If I scroll down, I actually do have the joke here, where the terminal say to GitHub, get out of here. But I don't know that as a screen reader user because it, one, did not give me a confirmation that the joke was added, and two, did not scroll my focus down to the newly added joke. That is a problem. So that is how you test accessibility for a component that looks and does the job, but not really well for all users. Okay, so let's just say that I haven't added any joke and I don't want to add any joke and I'm just reading the joke. So what do I do? How do I navigate there? So I'm at the top of this page. I just landed on this page, and if I hit tab, this is the first thing that it navigates me to. If I hit tab again, I get to the next input, and now if I hit tab, it actually goes back to the top of the toolbar of my browser toolbar, localhost 3000, and now it's telling me that it's a toolbar and you can enter text in it. That's not what I want to do. I want to figure out what's in the page. So if I hit tab again and try to go back to my list of jokes, I'm not able to get to it. Why is that happening? What the heck is the problem? So as you can see, something that looks normal, looks like, would announce the text, is not doing its job. So let's actually look at why this is happening. I'm going to open my console to show you what the user would see. Okay. Now I am in, if you are on Chrome, it'll show you this little man. If you click on this, it'll show you what the screen reader sees basically. This is all of the information that the screen reader has about your app. It's called the accessibility tree. And this is what a screen reader sees. Okay, now when I'm here, you see it says ignored. Why does it say ignored? So if I am in here again, it doesn't change. It still says ignored. I have no idea why it's saying ignored. But now if I see here, main is empty. Some of these items have ignored, but the text is all there, yet it is not perceivable for the user. So that is one important thing to test with screen readers. Now if I switch this screen reader, this accessibility off, I'm gonna switch the screen reader off.
Voiceover off.
And now let me actually show you what the code looks like and why is it what is the problem with the code right now. One of the things that I told you earlier is that semantic HTML is better than div. Don't use div for everything. But if you look at the code here, you'll see that there is a div at the top. There's a header component. That's fine. We're able to get into this. We're able to understand this. When I actually landed on the page, I was also hearing H1 and I could see Jokester. And then this div, which is the input field, I am able to get into this no problem. So the header is fine. So my semantic HTML elements up till here is fine. But then when I get into this div, hopefully this is big enough. Maybe that's better. When I get into this div, as you can see here, there is no ARIA label. There is no ARIA role. This data slot to the screen reader, it means nothing because there is no ARIA attribute on this. So the screen reader has no context that there is list items here that it actually needs to read through. So that is the problem. This is actually completely absent to the screen reader because this has no ARIA attributes. Divs are not perceived as text with content that the user should understand. So if they don't have described ARIA labels, ARIA roles, or attributes, they can be skipped. And in this case, they are being skipped. This is so dangerous for a web app because now they have no freaking idea what's going on the site. So that is the problem with this app. So is this doing well? And how is this from accessibility perspective? Well, UI looks good, but it does not look good to a screen reader. That's number one step. But we can fix this. I will show you the code that I've implemented already since I'm kind of short on time. I'll show you how to implement this and how to fix this. I'm going to check out the other branch. By the way, all of this code is currently in a GitHub repo. This is actually an example repo that I'm building for TanStack Start. I'm gonna make like detailed content on TanStack Start in the future. For now, I want you to focus on accessibility of this app. I'm gonna check out Git checkout. I have the other code in what is it? Align. Step 2. Oh wait, what did I do? Git status. Git diff. Oh, I added another joke. Huh, nice. Git add. Git commit. Adding new jokes. So with the help of TanStack Start, actually when I submit the form, it writes to a file. And I'll do a detailed tutorial on that on this YouTube channel, so stay tuned. Okay, Git checkout. Ally step 2. Alrighty. Now let's actually take a look at how did this become better. Let me first show you that actually I didn't change anything in the UI. All right. I did add like a like and dislike button, but for now, let's actually ignore this. All right, I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions so far on the first part of this app. All right. All right, let me see if there's any questions. Maybe that is not a list and only a div rendering. Yes, the thing outside main is ignored since head and then body tag are ignored. Yes, it is just a bunch of divs actually. Are you using Tailwind? I'm using Tailwind, but very little actually. Most of this is ShadCN. These are all ShadCN components. Okay, are there any other questions about the first part of this demo? ShadCN also uses Tailwind, that's true. I have a question that what were the best semantic tags that we should change the divs to? Yeah, I'll get into that in this example. Are you going to add a toast message or pop-up? We could add a toast message or pop-up. For now, we are not going to tackle that part yet. I have a question that what are the best, where to find which semantic tags to use when? I'll get to this question in a second. This is what the demo will show as well. Are we able to see the repo? Yes, you can see the repo in here. Let me share the link. You know what? I am gonna make a new repo out of this. But for now, here is the repo. I'll share the repo in the description of the live stream if you're watching this later. But for now, check out this repo. And all of the branches are in there as well, the ones that I'm going to be demoing. All right, so let's get into it. So we're going to walk through this again and see. So UI perspective, you can see that nothing changed, right? I still have this, but something changed. Like when I tab, I can actually go through the next item, right? And then when I keep tabbing, I can go through the next item, which is great. Now let's imagine that at the bottom of this, I actually have like a subscribe button. And I want to get to that. What do I have to do to get to that button? If I have tab index, or like if I have this tabbing enabled everywhere, I'll have to navigate through all of these jokes so I can get to the last button, which is pretty annoying. Remember we talked about creating a good user experience. So even though technically this is accessible in the sense that I can tab to this component, the subscribe newsletter component, it's not a good user experience because you have to tab through like 25 different jokes in order to get to the bottom. So keep that in mind when you're doing accessibility testing. Now I'll show you why this is tabbable right now. So if I open this and I'm going to go back to my, actually I'm going to show you in here as well. Now if I go back to my my code here, you'll notice that the div is now of that the row. We have assigned a new role here of list. Okay, and then for each of these divs, I've added a role of list item. And I've added a tab index of 0 as well. So what that helps us do is that I can actually now tab into these components. And the reason I want to do that is, let's say that there is an interactable element in here, like we had earlier, just 2 buttons. If I want, save this. Okay, now if I want, I could actually tab into this and click this button. And I can click that like and dislike button. So I can do that, and now this list becomes interactive. So there's 3 things I changed. I added a div role of list to this entire list at the top. So now I'm describing what this looks like to the screen reader. So now the screen reader will understand that this is a list and it will activate its list functionalities. Secondly, for the list, I also need to attach a list item to its children. So I'm doing that by adding a role of list item. And thirdly, I'm making these list components or the list items interactive by adding a tab index of 0. And if I switch to my guy here, you'll notice that now instead of just being like, even though it says ignored here, don't worry about that. But here you'll see it says list and it has a label that says developer jokes. And then within this, it has list item focusable. Focusable basically means that you can tab into it, focus it using keyboard. And then all of these are now list items. So step 2, which is one, or like the first improvement we've made, is move from div elements to a semantic, to a role element, which is already much better than what we had previously. But also, next thing we have made is made it interactive by adding a tab index. So now this list is keyboard focusable. Nice. But it's still not a great user experience, just like we saw, because if you have to go to the bottom, you'll have to navigate through all of these like 25 different questions to get to the bottom. So is there something that we can do better than that? And I'm going to leave that as a question for you. What do you think we should do to make this experience better for a user who's going through these list items and has to now tab through every single one of this? Now, I think one question you might also have in your head is that, well, you still kept it as a div. You didn't actually made it a list, like an unordered list, and then made it a list item, right? You talked about semantic HTMLs being better than roles, but you still kept it as a list. And this is what I would say. This is something that I learned at work. Semantic HTML, a list and a UL would be helpful here. However, They both come with their own set of styles. Like list has this bullet, so you have to go ahead and remove them for the rest of your app. Most times when we develop components, custom components like this one, we actually end up assigning role equals list and list items, because that's what the list semantic HTML gives to us, instead of removing the styles from the component. That's just the general practice the community has adopted. And the reason being, the styles can give like wonky CSS issues, and it's a lot easier to keep your list manageable by adding role of list and list item, and you still get the same functionality out of it. So that's that. So the semantic HTML that would have worked here would have been a list and a list item, but by adding a role of list and list item, you're able to get exact same functionality without the added design that comes with a list and list item. Alrighty. I asked you what do you think we can do in order to make this user experience better? I guess one pain point that we can observe is that you have to kind of go through all of these 20 different items in order to get to the bottom. How can we skip that? Is there a way through which we can let the user just see the first one and understand if they want to go through the list? And if they don't, then we just skip it. So you might have seen something called skip to main content in a lot of the web apps, right? I think I can demo that on google.com. If I open google.com, and I think if I have voiceover on, it actually does that automatically. So I'm going to open voiceover. And I'm actually going to keep voiceover in my... I'm going to open accessibility, open voiceover. Okay.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control the computer using only your keyboard. If you already know how to use VoiceOver, press the V key now. If you want to learn how to use
Voiceover on. Speech off.
Okay, so I just muted my voiceover so it doesn't bother us so it doesn't speak over me. Now let me go back into my app and show you, I think maybe on google.com when I land, it shows me skip to main content. Okay, something that you can see here, like as I load my page and I hit tab, it goes directly into search by voice. And that reason is because Google is able to understand that I'm using a screen reader, I'm using assistive technology, and I could probably benefit from that. And this could be a better experience instead of taking me through the toolbar at the top. So another example of why user experience is more important than just blindly adding semantic HTML. All right, let's coming back to our app. What did we want to do here? Okay, now if you see, now when I tabbed in here and I like hit tab again, it says list developer jokes question a guy ordered a pizza and just goes to say the name, the joke itself. Now it's able to get into this, and then it's able to actually recite what the joke is. So now if I keep tabbing through, it actually says the jokes as well. Already we're in a better place, right? We were not accessible, we were not seeing anything in the list, but already we're in a better place. Even though this takes like hundreds of seconds away, like hundreds of clicks to actually get to the bottom, it's still a better experience than what we had before. So now let's make it even better. Let's go ahead and make this even better. And by making it better, I'm going to show you a really cool technique that we call Roving tab index? If you've heard of roving tab index, say yes in the chat, or if this is new to you, tell me it's new to me, so I know how much detail to go into it. Okay, I'm also going to take a quick break because my brain is getting foggy. But I will be back in 2 minutes. New to tab index, literally heard it first time. Sweet. I love hearing that because then I can go in detail. But please leave in the chat if you've heard of. Have you heard of roving tab index? Roving tab index. Yes or new to it? Okay, I'm gonna put that in the chat. Let me know what you think. And let's also take a quick break. All right, we're back. Damn, this has been going on for 2 hours. I can't believe that my 30-minute talk is going to be a 2 hour session here. But let's get into it because it's almost 11:10 and the girl got to sleep and pack. I haven't packed yet. Thankfully, my demo is built. All right, so I'm going to show you what is roving tab index. Now, I have added a very clear shadow here to show you which item is focused in the list, just to kind of explain the idea. Okay, in roving tab index, as you can see, there are a lot of items in here. However, this could be a really long list of items, and the user may not even be interested in any of these items. They're probably just trying to get to the next interactive element on the page, which is the newsletter at the bottom. That's totally possible, right? And to fix that, what we can do is implement this thing called Roving tab index, which I'll demonstrate now. So I'm at the top of the list, I tap tab. Now I am in the list, and okay, first of all, let me turn this thing off. Where was that thing? Profiler. Oh wait, no, it's not there. Because this is annoying. Wait. Okay, you know what? Let's keep going. I don't have time for this. Okay, so you're on this page, and I'm gonna go to the top. Okay, so I am in this, and I'm gonna hit tab key, and I'm now on this box that's highlighted. Now if I hit tab again, note what happens. If I hit tab again, I'm taken to the bottom of the page, right? And then if I hit tab again, I'm taken to the subscribe button, and if I hit tab again, I'm in the toolbar, and it goes back to the top. But now if I hit tab again, I'm at the start of the app again, and I can navigate between this list by using my arrow keys. So now I'm using the down arrow key on my computer, and when I hit up and down, I actually navigate the list now. I think it's the Tanstack router that's doing that thing. The Tanstack start that's showing. It's kind of annoying, but let's just keep it because I can't remember how to turn this off. But anyways, so if you see here, like now I'm going to be using my up and down arrow keys to actually navigate between. And now if I hit shift tab, it goes back to the previous interactive element. And now if I hit tab, it goes to the list. And then now if I hit tab, it goes to the next interactive element. This way, we've actually used the entire list as just one item, just one interactive item, and put that in the tab sequence. So now you go between the input fields at the top, the list, and then the subscribe button at the bottom. So we've taken all of the lists out, all of the individual items of the list out, and put that into a single tab stop. It's a single tabbable element. And I'm going to show you in code what that looks like. So if I go to my body in my main div section, okay, I still have that role equals list. We remember this, we were working on this, but look at the tab index here. So I'll show you, where am I at the top? I'm here, okay? I am at, so I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna go tab. I'm at here, I'm gonna hit shift tab. I am on this question, and I'm gonna use my arrow keys. See how the things on the right change. You'll see that I get tab index of 0 on one element, which is the question that's highlighted right now. And as I use my keyboard keys up, the tab index starts moving to 0 for the previous element, and this element becomes -1. And now if I hit tab again, shift tab, and if I hit up arrow, the tab index actually moves to the top of the list until I'm at the first element in the list, and that is the one with the tab index of 0. Everything else is a -1. That is a roving tab index. And the reason we're doing this is because we can make this entire list one single tab stop. And by doing that, in order to do that, we create a tab index of 0 to the first element that we want to add a focus to. And we put tab index equal to -1, which is programmatically removing it from the tab order, and going back to the next interactive element, which is the button, which automatically has a tab index of 0. So by using a tab index of -1 and 0 and using keyboard keys to navigate between the items, we're able to manipulate which item has a tab index of 0, which keeps that element as the active interactive element in the DOM elements list. And that is roving tab index. It's called roving tab index because it goes in a cycle. It goes from 0, -1, and then when you move down, it goes 0, everything else is -1, and like that, it sequentially moves the tab index to the next item in the list. Now, how are we going to implement that? That is going to be my talk. I'm going to leave that part for you to come and check out and hang out during my talk. I'm going to leave the text, the link for that. This is going to be live streamed for free on YouTube on 26th. My talk is at, what time is it at? 4th? Let's see. Epic Conf. It's in Mountain Time. My talk is at 5 p.m. but this is Mountain Time, so this will be, I don't know what, 5 p.m. to 12 p.m. Mountain Time to PST converter. I'm going to leave this link as well. And I think you might be able to choose a time zone there. Let's see, time zone converter. I think this is the one. I thought that was a better one. Oh, this one. Okay, so my talk is at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Right? Utah is in Mountain Time, right? Utah time zone. Mountain Time. Okay, perfect. And then you can use this link to find out what time is it where you are. So it's going to be 5 p.m. Mountain Time for me. And I'm going to leave these links in the chat. My talk is at 10:10. Okay, that is the link to convert the time. And my talk is at 5 p.m. and the link for the live stream is gonna be this one. Live stream at 5 p.m. MDT. Here it is. This is where my talk is going to be. So the dry run that I did today, I'm going to be doing the same talk at Epic Conf. And I wanted to do this talk to help you kind of get a preview of what I'm talking about and see if you have any feedback for me. So if you have any feedback, leave that in the chat. I will be taking a look at it and incorporating your feedback as well. And let me see if there's any questions so far. How did we implement this? I will show that in the live stream. Isn't it key bindings? Unsure what to say that, but when we do e.key equals event.tapKey. Yeah, that's actually part of it as well. So what you do is you do handle key down and then you implement like e.enter or e.arrow down, e.arrow up. But you also have to implement that tab index equals 0 and tab index equals -1 and keep track of which index is on. So it's a little bit complicated. I walk through that in my app, but I think I might make a video on that as well. Let me know if this is something you would want to see in a long form video. Okay, this is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to share this with the rest of the audience at Epic Conf. I think Epic Conf has a bunch of really great talks, and if you are awake at the time when the conference is live streaming, do check out the live stream. There's going to be tons of great topics, and I will see you after being back from Epic Conf. Actually, hold on. Tomorrow I'll be at Epic Conf. The day after I'll be at the conf, and then the day after that is my travel time. So I will see you in a week. Actually, I'll see you in April now. This is the final live stream session for March. But when we come back in April, we're going to pick up building an agent as well. We were 70% there, but we're going to build it up again. And I'll be back on April 3rd. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. I will see you soon. I'll see you in that live stream. Bye.